This evening, let's master the art of no-self meditation, your path to enlightenment. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible by kind-hearted viewers just like you who help support this channel on Patreon. This evening, we could chant and meditate and enjoy a lesson or two, but first, if you love Star Wars and you wish to meditate as transformatively as Obi-Wan Kenobi upon the sands of Tatooine under the guidance of Qui-Gon Jinn, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Good news. If at any point during this live stream you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them to your life, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window on the right-hand side of the screen. Please do not wait till the end of the live stream, because by then, my brains will have transformed into silly putty. Instead, when you have a question, please strike while the iron is hot. So, the key to mastering the art of no-self meditation is explored in the 33rd verse of a text known as the spaciousness of Vajrasattva. It's known in Tibet as Dorje Sampa Namkache. Its author is thought to be Prahe Vajra, who is known in Tibet as Garab Dorje. This particular portion reads, appearances, symbols of the all-good, never change into something other than the presence of mindfulness. Never being other than presence, appearances are therefore the basis of the wisdom of letting go. In the absence of grasping, nothing has a self-identity. Absent rejecting, there is only the equality that indescribably transcends speech. Now, let's see if we can't elucidate this word salad. So, the all-good is short for the all-good one. The all-good one could be short for all-good, the all-good one, mother and father, which refers to this blue Buddha and this white Buddha doing the hibbity-dibbity on the screen before you. That is a metaphor of a metaphor. This can be thought of as the blue Buddha represents the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, and the white Buddha humping him could be a metaphor for a cumulus cloud floating across this otherwise empty blue sky. That is a metaphor of perception. Perception and object of perception, or nature of perception. And to really get the gist of that, it'll help if we jump ahead and explore mindfulness and meditation. So mindfulness and meditation, as I've mentioned ad nauseum, are known by many names: Zen, Chan, Dhyana, Mahamudra, Mahasandhi, Ati Yoga, Dzogchen, and even Trekcho. Despite the fanciness of the names, the technique taught by the Buddha, the most powerful technique attributed to the Buddha, works this way. We practice mindfulness, or I should say, during each inhalation, we are wired not for active concentration, but instead for mindfulness. That is simply perceiving things vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, due to the workings of our sympathetic nervous system, which we naturally and automatically access during each inhalation. The easiest way to practice this is to silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this during each inhalation. So our inhalation experience is like the beautiful, radiant cumulus cloud in an otherwise empty, rich, deep blue sky. Now, as we sit there, vulnerably surfing our in-breath, we could notice sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, including emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. That's an armload. What are we to do with all this stuff? We meditate. But what does that mean? It means that during our exhalation, we physically relax. Doing so helps us to mentally release that which we noticed during our inhalation, which could now feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast, empty void. A simile is only as effective as it is relatable. So what is a real-world example of a non-graspable, vast, empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky and a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although is tantalizing to the eye, is rather intangible when we try to grasp it with our fingers. So, another way of thinking of it is this way. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our inhalation could now feel as non-graspable as if it was not me. My late stepfather used to say the basic definition that if the basic definition of comedy was you slipping and falling on a banana peel, then the basic definition of tragedy is me slipping and falling on a banana peel. When accepting his Oscar for Hamlet, the effete British thespian Sir Laurence Olivier said, "Acting is all about three things: me, me, and me." And of course, everyone laughed and thought that was funny. But we are inherently self-centered. We're wired to see the world through our 5 sense organs and through our mind, which is capable of the 5 attributes I've just mentioned. In addition to perception, it's capable of emotion, intention, thought, memory, and imagining. So we are wired to perceive the world self-centeredly. Our job is not to pretend that is not the case. Our job is to use that as skillfully as possible. So what we're saying is, of all the things we can grasp, our sense of self, our sense of body, our sense of emotion, our sense of intention, our sense of thought, our sense of recall, our sense of imagination, are the most real to us. So what we're saying is, and we're being really vulnerable and admitting to ourselves, hey, as self-centered entity, whatever I've noticed during whenever I relax into my exhalation, whatever I noticed during the previous inhalation could feel as non-graspable, as abstract, as if it was not me. Now you might say, well, what if you noticed your sense of self during your last inhalation? The same holds true. If I noticed let's pretend during our last inhalation you noticed randomly your body. then during your next exhalation, when you relaxed into the exhalation, that same body could feel less like you. So it's not a literal phenomena, it's a metaphor of non-graspability. There are two types of people who think of it literally. Those who are trained to be superstitious, or those who are trained to be pseudo-intellectuals. I know I was both. I got to tell you, the path paved by superstition and pseudo-intellectualism leads to a dead end. It doesn't lead to peace. Let's pretend we had a sense of mind. Well, during our next exhalation, as we relax into our next exhalation, that the sense of mind we experienced during our last inhalation could feel less like our sense of self. And to put a fine point on it, to gild the lily, if during our next inhalation we felt a sense of self, me, my body, my mind, my relationships, my dignity, my reputation, my success, my failure, my, me. We all feel it. Let's not lie to ourselves. During our next relaxing exhalation, that sense of self could feel less graspable. This is not a question of logic. This is not a question of something to believe in. It's just the way our autonomic nervous system works, which we're wired to access during each exhalation. So no, we don't wink in and out of existence like some great strobe light, although that's a fun song by the B-52s. There's lots of confusion on this subject. And so many centuries ago, the South Indian Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna taught of the two truths, that whatever we experience, whether it is appearing, whatever we experience can be thought of as being appearing, yet non-graspable, sensual, yet non-graspable, resounding, yet non-graspable, lucid, yet non-graspable, fragrant, yet non-graspable. Let's see, did I count all the five senses? Appearing yet non-graspable, resounding yet non-graspable, sensual yet non-graspable, flavorful yet non-graspable, fragrant yet non-graspable. There you go. So that we're not saying that things don't exist. We're just saying subjectively we're wired to let go during each in-breath. And subjectively we're wired to notice during in-breath. There's nothing wrong with noticing. There's nothing wrong with letting go. In fact, we're designed to do it. And this isn't unique to humans. There's an approach to psychology whose name eludes me right now. It may occur to me later on. But they take a body-centered approach to psychology. And these people will notice that when in the wild, when a prey animal flees from a carnivore, a predator, when they are successful in eluding the creature trying to eat them, they will lay down and they will take a nap, and during the nap they will have a violent physiological motor tics. And that's just their body's way of processing the fight and flight experience. So, and then 9 times out of 10, when they wake up from that dramatic sleep cycle, they feel as right as rain and ready to start grazing again. So the experience of letting go, the experience of voidness, the experience of no self is not unique to humans. We're really good at assigning labels to it. But as the Buddha has taught, it's a mistake to confuse labeling with wisdom. So let's return to the passage. Appearances, symbols of the all-good, never change into something other than the presence of mindfulness. So presence in the Dzogchen tradition of Tibetan Buddhism is a synonym for mindfulness. So think of it this way. When any healthy human is startled, they have a generally identical reaction. All their metaphoric doors of perception snap wide open, and they'll rapidly change their posture into a combative or defensive posture, and they'll actually change the way they're looking. They'll change their head position, which actually changes our vision from foveal to peripheral. The reason that's important is that there are once one has been thrust into a startled state, all their senses are vulnerable and open. And so that's been known, so that's become a metaphor of the heightened perceptual acuity that we're wired to experience by evolution during each inhalation. Never being other than presence, mindfulness, appearances are therefore the basis of wisdom and letting go. As long as there's been bad teachers, there's been people trying to find shortcuts. And at least 80% of teachers are really bad, sometimes maliciously, usually just lazy-minded or superstitious. And a bad teacher will confuse concentration with mindfulness. They're completely different. Concentration will feed our tendencies of our underbrain, of our amygdala, of our fear center, to be rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. And no one finds that fulfilling. The anterior cingulate gyrus in our middle brain, the frontish part of our middle brain, is the seat of empathy. And when that rules our body and brain, we have a greater propensity to be flexible, loving, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. When we have the misfortune of funding a teacher who can't tell the difference between mindfulness and concentration and teaches concentration, we have a natural aversion to it. And we look for an end run around it, to borrow a term from football. We look for a way to leapfrog over it. That's natural. But what the author is reminding us here is that perception isn't bad. In the concentration, teachers say notice one thing or notice no thing. And if you notice anything other than that one thing or anything other than no thing, you suck, you're a failure, and you're an abomination. Gee, Mom, thanks. But and what the author here is saying, yes, we've all heard that. It's malarkey. Perception is needful in the path. Some people say, well, Nagarjuna said perception was conventional reality and letting go is ultimate reality. Well, ultimate sounds so much better than conventional. I'll just do ultimate. No. No one is wired to only exhale. If you only exhale, never inhale, you will turn a very unpleasant shade of blue. You will tip over, wiggle funny, and frighten the dog. So just as only breathing out and never breathing in is impractical, similarly, only letting go and never noticing is also impractical. So the author here is reminding us that not only is perception tolerable, it's necessary. Without noticing things vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, there can be no release. We continue. In the absence of grasping, nothing has a self-identity. Or in other words, physically relaxing in harmony with our exhalation is the key to letting go. We cannot self-talk our way out of neurosis. We cannot believe our way out of neurosis, despite the ravings of Christian fundamentalists or Jewish fundamentalists or Hindu fundamentalists or Buddhist fundamentalists. You cannot believe yourself out of neurosis. In fact, if you try to do, hey, remember the old saying? I first was introduced to the saying by a woman from Arkansas. She said, "Don't try to teach the pig to sing. You'll waste your time and annoy the pig." Well, the first time this Jew heard that, I thought it was hysterically funny. To me, pigs were these exotic creatures. Ooh, what's a pig? City boy McGee over here. Ooh, what's a pig? But similarly, when we use our prefrontal cortex for something it has not evolved to do, and it has not evolved for emotional regulation, and when we try to use it for emotional regulation, we exhaust it. And an exhausted prefrontal cortex leads to the many symptoms of depression, which nobody enjoys. Fortunately, the most basic part of our central nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system ensconced within our spinal cord in the thoracic region, and the parasympathetic nervous system ensconced within the spinal cord in both its cervical and lumbar regions, that is wired to notice and release. Therefore, the emphasis of this profoundly important Dzogchen text is that if we use our inhalation and our exhalation, our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous systems, the way they evolved to be used, enlightenment is remarkably close. Remarkably close. If we don't use it, it's always 20 years away. This verse concludes, absent rejecting, there is only the equality that transcends speech. As long as we use this system of noticing as we breathe in and relaxing as we breathe out, regardless of how different things were experienced during our in-breath, during our out-breath, they all have the same metaphoric taste, the taste of emptiness. Or in this case, the same metaphoric sound, the sound of emptiness, the sound of non-graspability. We're using sound here, not literally, but figuratively. Now you might say, and rightly so, you might ball up your fists and put them on your hands and stick out your chest like you're Mick Jagger on stage and say, well, hey, all these used metaphors are inconvenient, slumpy, and they are prone to confusion. And you would be exactly right. Well, why persist with them? Because we are wired in such a way as to think symbolically. Imagine going back to the distant past, not 100,000 years, not 100 million years, but even beyond that, to those primitive life forms on this planet. They first perceived, and then they could begin recalling past perceptions and anticipating future perceptions. And that became the basic armature, the basic framework upon which the profoundly complex brains of all species of all vertebrates on this planet evolved. So fundamentally, we are wired, we have evolved to process the external and the internal world symbolically. That is why humans might start off speaking literally. But as they continue speaking on a subject, they'll begin to use simile. And as they continue speaking on the subject, those similes will become metaphors, which are wonderfully helpful if you really understand the subject matter, but are deeply confusing the first time you hear them. That is one of the caprices or eccentricities or unhappy side effects of the way life on this planet has evolved. So there you have it. What is the key to know self? To allow ourselves to notice as we breathe in and relax as we breathe out. Before we begin this evening's formal practice, I think it could be great fun if together as a team we chanted the Wednesday night portion of the vast expanse of Vajrasattva, or Dorje Sampa Namka Chai, Che, composed by Prahe Vajra, or Garab Dorje. Together. A gradual spiritual path of purification is at odds with the effortlessness of the true condition. This text was written literally many centuries before anybody ever dreamt up the Tibetan Ngondro. And this is warning against it. This is also warning against Vajrayana. This will say, don't get stuck on mantras and visualizations and prayers and rituals and purification. Just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Let's continue. Realization does not come by following such a... let's go back because I broke the momentum. A gradual spiritual path of purification is at odds with the effortlessness of the true condition. Realization does not come by following such a path. That is like searching for the end of space. The true condition being what it is, revealed as it is, cannot be seen as a path to travel. The state of effortless enlightenment is the source of all. Its manifestations are all marvelous wonders. Past and present abound within the true condition. The eternal now of consciousness is the path for all. This is suchness, the light of wisdom, the realization of enlightened beings both past and yet to come. This living presence is a universal way. The moon in its reflection on water are non-dual. The mind of awakening is not to be found by those engrossed in fabricated features and stages of the way. There has been a tantric ngondra, there is a sutric ngondra, or lamrim, stages of the path. There's a tantric version, there's a sutric version. I was taught both by Buddhist fundamentalists for many years. And on my journey, I was then introduced to Dzogchen, which said, you should have been taught those. Those things are a great distraction. And you know what? They were. They really, really were. And so one of the things I hope to do is to make other people's journey to enlightenment, other people's journey to the mastery of the Buddha's teachings, swifter and easier and more blissful than mine was. Let's return. Let's tap button 5. Let us take a moment to exercise the neural pathways responsible for empathy and enthusiasm. We do this just as like a sprinter's starter block, just to kind of like have a touchstone. Together. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, or students. Whether or not the Buddha was real or merely an archetype, the fable or history of the Buddha teaches us an example of someone who sat down and learned how to let go in a really loving, sustainable way. Now, let's meditate. So remember, as we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this, and as we breathe out, we silently and mentally recite the noun, not the verb, but the noun void, which is just a metaphor of non-graspability. As we breathe in, we notice, and as we breathe out, we relax. And we will notice all sorts of things. We will notice some of the stuff we notice will be external, some will be internal, some will be physical, some will be mental, some will be pleasurable, some will be painful, some will be interesting, some will be boring, some will be glorious, and others will be grotesque. Yes, welcome to Halloween. Our own inner Halloween between our ears. Dun dun dun. So let's talk about the neurology of trauma, of post-traumatic stress disorder, and its big brother, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Whenever we experience a memory as the present, that means it has not gone into long-term memory. I mean, there was an episode of the 70s show where the gang are trying to get into a disco, and the protagonist, Toffer's girlfriend and her friends get in, but the red velvet rope goes down before him. And there's no way on earth that the doorman is letting him in. And so our hippocampus pretty much acts like the doorman or the bouncer for the nightclub of our long-term memory. And this method of this uncomfortable, scary method of being vulnerable to what we experience as we breathe in and allowing our body to physically relax, even to a certain degree as we exhale, is an excellent way of processing this unresolved memory. We don't get there by self-talk. We don't get there through belief. We get there by the therapeutic use of our autonomic nervous system. The only way over it is through it. Humans are complex things. Sometimes we have triggers based on some variation of trauma. Sometimes we have triggers based on just the developmental eccentricities of our neurology. For instance, in those who also suffer, who join me in experiencing autism, are not unfamiliar with what some people call pathological demand avoidance. And when one is in a situation where a real or quasi-authoritarian figure tries to take away one's autonomy or dig into one's autonomy, or that is just perceived, whether it's happening or not, there's a whole cascade of physiological causes. So contrary to the fluffy psychology of the 1970s, not all our problems are caused from stinking thinking or poor self-esteem or stuff like that, or bad self-talk. It's caused by the interface of our wiring and all its eccentricities and uniqueness. and the world in which we dwell. And meditating, 9 times out of 10, isn't going to make everyone around us suddenly stop being a troll. But it can help us to cope really well. So when meditation is practiced correctly, we do not repress our emotions, we do not indulge our emotions, but we do process our emotions through the efficient and sometimes very uncomfortable practice of vulnerably noticing and then relaxing. There are many very intelligent people who try to think their way out of emotions. And all they wind up doing is exhausting themselves and start creating the causes or adding to the pre-existing causes of depression, whether it is acute or whether it is chronic. And so when I tell someone, when I advise someone, and when I request someone not to try to think their way out of emotion, but to feel it and release it just through noticing, just through inhalation and exhalation, I'm not trying to insult their intellect, I'm trying to protect it. I remember something from an episode of The Mandalorian. No, it was actually an episode of Boba Fett, where Ahsoka Tano is talking to the Mandalorian, and she says, "I've seen what attachment can do to a fully trained Jedi, to the best of us." And I'm going to paraphrase that and say, I've seen what trying to use self-talk and logic can do to the most intelligent people with the best of hearts. And I'll tell you, every time it leads to the exhaustion of the prefrontal cortex. To the point when someone says, I'm just going to go to bed and try to and hope to restart my day tomorrow, regardless of how early it is. That's not a sign of resourcefulness. That's a sign of someone blowing through the resourcefulness because they're using their prefrontal lobes for something has not evolved to do. Prefrontal lobes are great for problem solving and for spatial organization and mathematics. That's wonderful. But it did not evolve for emotional regulation. Let us seal our meditation by chanting the 4 immeasurables. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy. May no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could type something in the chat window. You could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could share it with a friend. You could even help support this channel on Patreon. In approximately 10 and 2/3 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tomorrow's early morning lesson and meditation. Until then, may you and yours be happy and healthy. And if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.